We're back. We left just a minute ago. How much was part of that saved? Okay. So we were talking about the smoking ban. Part of what we have to deal with when we go on a local shoot or we go on a remote is, I don't know which camera I'm talking to, the bandwidth of the different bars from which we shoot varies. So if we're on a narrow bandwidth, and apparently it's a little bit narrow here compared to other bandwidths, then the signal doesn't carry the show. So we just kind of blanked out there for a minute. They're not studies. What they'll show is the effects of smoking on the economy generally and whether or not so many bars are in business in a given area. So, yeah, you might have the same number of liquor licenses, but the small business bar owners go out of business because they lose their clientele, and large corporations will move in and buy those bars.
So and I've read the Indianapolis Star, the editorials, and they try to insist that the smoking ban actually help business, not hurt business.
And that's crap. That's why a lot of the local communities...
I don't know if you can say crap, Mark, can you?
The United States Supreme Court says that we can use that word.
Okay.
As I believe Justice Alito said that nobody really watches broadcast television anymore.
Yes.
So we can say crap. But that's crap because people don't go to a community because smoking is banned everywhere. And let's be clear. The smoking ban we're talking about only affects, the way that they put it through this time, only affects 3 to 4% of the bars in Marion County. Less than 1% of the businesses are affected. So the ban was in a...
What do you mean the smoking ban only affects 3 or 4% of the bars?
Because there are 12 plaintiffs in this lawsuit that have chosen to file suit. So as it is right now, we only have 3 to 4% of the bars, like 360 bars in Marion County, want to have smoking for their patrons.
Well, there could be others that just didn't join the lawsuit.
That is true. That is true. But even before that, and I said this before on the show, in Broad Ripple, which is a part of Indianapolis where we shot the show and stuff, there must be 30 bars there. And before the ban took effect on June 1st, they were down to 4 bars that allowed smoking. So the market had already worked itself out. And now there's no place in which somebody can smoke. And they've put a stigma on smokers, too. First of all, cigarette smokers are all bad because you cannot smoke a cigarette any place except like a private club, a fraternal organization like the American Legion or VFW Post.
And even that is limited because in order to have smoking in the American Legion, for example, a private club, you have to install very expensive equipment.
Well, and you're also limited to people being there who are members of the club. So the general public cannot smoke cigarettes except outside. Then Marion County put in effect another ordinance that says the state of Indiana put in a statute that says you have to be 8 feet or more away from the doorway of a business in order to smoke cigarettes outside the business.
Right. And that could be a problem in a lot of downtown areas where there's bars right next to each other. You're always going to be within 8 feet of a door.
Or it could be really bad weather, and that's not taking into consideration the health of the people who want to go outside and smoke.
Right.
So ultimately the smoking ban, if you go to the original reason why they put a smoking ban in 2005, was purportedly to protect children and non-smokers. The ban as it is now in effect, children aren't an issue because this is an 21 or over establishment. The only people that are affected are non-smoking employees. And studies have indicated that there is no harm from so-called secondhand smoke. So that even is out the window. It's really a farce.
Isn't that contradictory, though, to what they've been saying, that there are studies?
No, there aren't. The studies that they have are statistically insignificant.
And how so?
Okay. These are epidemiological studies. That means that they compare populations over periods of time, and they'll compare, like, let's say you've got a popular study is of spouses, one smokes, the other doesn't smoke. They look at their health over the years and draw conclusions as to what problems health-wise the non-smoking spouse has. Well, okay, first of all, there are what they call confounders in these studies. That means that there could be other reasons for that person developing health problems than being around the smoker. For example, a person could have not told the truth in the survey when they said at the beginning of the study, I'm a non-smoker. Why would somebody lie about being a non-smoker? Well, quite possibly because of health insurance. So they say that they're a non-smoker. They also could have smoked at one point in their life and quit. They could have worked in an environment with carcinogenic substances. That could be a factor. There are a lot of factors involved. They could live next to a coal-fired generating plant. There are a bunch of different factors in the environment that could cause them to have later health problems that makes the study, their exposure to secondhand smoke in the workplace, invalid.
So the problem is cause and effect. You have an effect, and they're saying because two things happening at the same time.
Oh, but they
there
can't
has to be the cause.
They can't show that they're at the same time, though, because the studies try to take into account the confounders of these other causes. And there are numbers that run with the confounders. So if you look at the studies, they'll have one column that shows a range, and it's like a range of error. It's a consistency interval or a confidence interval. And if that interval it runs from anything less than 1 to more than 1, it's not statistically valid. Because if you're getting one-on-one effect, that means it's the status quo. If you're getting 1 to 2 effect, that means you're having 100% effect from those specific, whatever it is in the environment. These studies have a range from under 1 to over 1, and that makes them statistically invalid. Most of them do. The only statistical significance to any of those ranges have to do with people of 40 years of age or older. And that's people who've lived a long life, and so it really calls into question the studies.
Wasn't there a big study 20 years ago, 15 years ago on secondhand smoke? I can't remember who did the study.
UCLA did a study that showed that there was no effect.
Okay, one UCLA. It was the one that everyone points to.
Oh, that was an EPA study. EPA study set out with a statement that it was as an a priori truth, secondhand smoke causes health problems. In other words, they were starting out with the conclusion
before they were trying to prove.
Yeah, before they started the study.
Yeah, which doesn't sound like what a scientist would do.
No, and the United States District Court in North Carolina termed that study as cherry picking, and it's really a scientific fraud.
Right. So, what studies have been? And what year was that EPA study?
The EPA study was 1993. I think I have a reference to it here. It's 93 or 97.
Okay.
And the U.S. District Court, and it wasn't even the EPA didn't do a study so much as it picked and chose studies. That was actually a report. Mm-hmm. So it's really not a valid gauge of anything.
Wasn't there something out of Helena, Montana, too?
Helena, Montana banned smoking for a while and then brought it back. There was a study on that. That was shown to be, that study was shown to be invalid.
They did a number of heart attacks that were...
They showed the number of heart attacks before, during, and after the smoking ban.
And they assumed it was because of the...
And the number of people involved in this, and it wasn't even a study. It was just looking at statistics. Was such a small number. It wasn't of any statistical significance.
Yeah. So what is the Indiana ban based on?
Based on all this bad science.
Indianapolis ban.
Indianapolis, based on bad science.
Okay. Did they point to particular studies?
They pointed to the EPA study. They pointed to a study from the California EPA that was done in, I think, 97, that the National Cancer Institute cribbed off of in 99. they've generalized about things and said, well, there are numerous studies that say this, and it's really not true. There aren't numerous studies that establish anything. Nobody's really ever established solidly that secondhand smoke does anything. And I think if you look at the City County Council committee in 2005 on children's health and the environment, the hearings that they had on that really showed what the political bias was. There were statements made that were silly.
Mm-hmm. What exactly is secondhand smoke?
If a person smokes, it's called mainstream smoke.
Okay.
Or if a person is standing in the same room as a person who's smoking, then the smoke that's ambient or in the air would be secondhand smoke.
Okay. So, if I'm standing outside and there's a number of cars going by, do I have health consequences from that? If I'm I could be out smoking a cigarette or standing out talking to people smoking a cigarette.
Air pollution can cause health effects, but the amount of exposure to smoke from cigarettes to non-smokers is so minute that it's virtually undetectable in the person's bloodstream. It's absurd to suggest that it would cause any health problems.
Well, one thing that I find interesting is there doesn't seem to be much effort to get a solid secondhand smoke study. They're willing to go with this junk science.
Actually, there have been good studies. UCLA did a study, showed that there were no harms. There have been other studies. The EPA passed over 4 or 5 studies because those studies didn't say what the EPA wanted to conclude.
If I'm in a bar, I'm not smoking, and I'm sitting next to someone smoking, how much, and I'm there for a couple hours, how many cigarettes have I smoked? Don't they measure by cigarette?
No, it's like not even one cigarette.
Yeah.
In order to have the equivalent of like 3 cigarettes or 2 cigarettes a day, you'd have to be virtually in a room filled with smoke for 8 hours.
Because I know they've criticized measuring the effect of secondhand smoke that way, measuring it by cigarettes.
Well, they're wanting to look at things. They're wanting to make comparisons to things so that they can establish laws, and that's what they've done, and people have bought the lies.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Well, we're at the end of this first segment. We're going to be back in a minute. We're going to have people on here and talk to them about the effects of the ban.